Don't miss Ensemble for These Times' upcoming concert, Mujeres Ahora, on May 9th at the Community Music Center, presented as part of the San Francisco International Arts Festival. For more information, go to www.e4tt.org.
Welcome to For Good Measure, an interview series celebrating diverse composers and other creative artists, sponsored by a grant from the California Arts Council. I'm Nanette McGuinness, Artistic Executive Director of Ensemble for These Times. In this week's episode, we continue our conversation with Zanaida Robles, who we spoke to in January 2024. Choral music features heavily in your compositional oeuvre. What's your process? How do you find or write your texts? Because you write some of your texts, right?
Some of them. I don't think I try to write text. I'm not trying to write texts, and I don't really see myself as much of a poet. I think I'm a romantic. And when I used to write, teenage love poetry, and I used to write poetry, and you look back on some things and you're just like, oh God.
Yes, the shame.
But every now and then something just comes out. I guess one way to describe the way I write is just sort of there's a lot of improvisation and intuition involved. Because I guess I start from the heart, from the spirit. Like that's sort of a foundation that I kind of start with. I'm kind of trying to grasp the feel of the text. If I'm writing or if something's coming, if I'm experiencing an emotion or an experience that I need to write about, there's a character inherent in that, so that will inform, for example, the key or the mood or the tempo or the harmony to begin with. But there's an intuition aspect of it, and then from there some songs just sort of, I guess there's an aspect of me that's more of a songwriter, and some things come out like, verses and choruses, or chorus will come out and then I'll construct a verse. Other things kind of come out with thematic material, or like a melodic line or a harmony. And then I'll use, whatever compositional skills, I've sort of cultivated, over the years of study, and try to construct something that way. I guess that's a long way to answer the question. There's lots of different techniques, but I guess the main thing to, I keep in mind is just always trying to get at the essence of if it's a choral text, I'm really trying to get at what is the character, what is the emotion, and then I try to construct something that brings that out musically.
Yeah. There's no wrong way. Everybody's different, and everybody gets at what they're doing in a different way, which is part of what makes this such a fascinating question.
Yeah, it's true. And I would also add that it changes. I don't approach every piece the same way, because I just don't think you can. I mean, I can't imagine having especially with vocal music, with choral music, because texts have such wildly different character and color. It requires different points of attack, I guess, different ways to get at it. So like you said, there is no wrong way to approach it. You do what feels right.
Right. What feels native. So for your texts that you don't write, where do you find those? Are they usually a commission? Somebody hands you a text, or?
It's a combination of things. I subscribe to, what is it? Poem a Day.
Yeah.
I think a lot of folks know about Poem a Day. What a great resource. I'm so grateful for the curators of the daily poetry they send out. You get a poem every day. Sometimes I'm kind of inundated right now. I haven't been reading my poems because I'm a little overwhelmed. But I really have been exposed all last year. Especially during COVID as well. I was just digesting all of this poetry, and there was so much writing happening about what was happening in the world.
Right.
And so that was kind of an intro. You start reading this outpouring of expressive poetry about the, this, what's going on. And then that kind of opens the door into other things. And then I got introduced to Poem a Day, and I've just learned about so many amazing poets, and because they publish public domain works as well as original copyrighted things as well by living poets. So there's a whole spectrum of things, and I've learned that some things feel like, to be honest, most of that stuff that, I used to like, I'm gonna scour this whole catalog, this whole library for a poem that I can set. I gotta find a text that's free.
Yes.
And I think I've evolved past that, and I'm at a point now where I'm actually just enjoying reading poetry. And every now and then the text will jump out and I'll be like, "Ooh, that's in the public domain," and it would make it, or it'll jump out and I'll say, "Let me see if I can contact this person," which has happened several times. I've actually been like, "I found your poem on Poem a Day. It moved me. I'm so moved by this. Well, like, may I have permission to set it?" So that's happened a couple of times as well, which is so cool, because then you find all these little connections between all these people you never thought you would have. So that's been a really cool element of my compositional life that I've been grateful for, is the connection to people through poetry. I never imagined that would happen, and it does happen.
No, it's true. So you're finding that most of them, when you reach out to them, they're happy to have you write to their poetry, their text.
Sometimes, I mean, there have been a few occasions. It doesn't happen all the time, and let me just say, like, I'm not a full-time composer. So when I talk about, oh, this happens and it's so great, like, okay, so it's happened like 2 or 3 times.
That's okay. That's all right.
You know what I mean? But like, and so of those few times it's happened, sometimes I get a response right away back, "I'm so glad you like what I wrote. You can just use it," or you can use everything. In one case, a person wrote back and like, "Thank you for reading my stuff. You can use whatever you want of mine forever. Go
forth and multiply," basically. Yeah.
And that's amazing. Sometimes I get, back, so-and-so's agent, or
right,
versus, assistant, Mr. or Dr. or Mrs. So-and-so would like to know what you intend to do with this poem, that kind of thing. And so there's all kinds of ways to engage with people at different stages and different levels, but generally there's a good response.
That's nice. Yeah. I guess the most disheartening one is, sure, you can, and you can pay $1,000 for the right to do it. In which case you go, well.
But you know what? I have gotten to a place now where I don't think I've had to pay quite that much for the use.
No, I'm exaggerating a little bit.
But I'm getting to a place where I realize, there's a difference between finding a poem you like and setting it, and having someone craft a lyric for you. And I actually haven't had that before. I haven't actually found a lyricist. That's kind of my next step. Like, at some point, you can only mine, so many sources for poetry, and you can only ask so many people. And honestly, I actually have been times where I've been like, oh, maybe I should set this. And then either the poet or someone else, or I will just come to the conclusion myself, will realize that this poem doesn't really need music, or this poem, or this, this poem deserves a life of its own for now.
On its own. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that's super valid. Do you remember when Amanda Gorman, like, when she came on the scene and she did her poetry at the inauguration, everybody was blown away.
Right.
And I got all these emails. You should set Amanda Gorman's text. Oh my God, you should set this. You should set this. And I'm thinking to myself, no, I think I'm gonna let her work. First of all, her poetry is so musical and lyrical just in itself. I don't really want to mess with that. So I haven't always been in this place as a composer, but now I'm at a place where, I can separate out and appreciate poetry for what it is. And, I'm starting to get into more, where can I really find lyrics? And perhaps it's time to pay and have someone actually craft that. So that's where I am in my career at this point.
Yeah, we've worked with a few composers who work specifically with their own lyricists. And we did one commission for the Cassandra project, where the composer brought her librettist in, basically, and they wrote it. She wrote the lyrics, and the composer wrote the text, and we were involved in kind of vetting the whole thing. It was a very powerful piece.
Yeah.
From 2020. That, I think, gives a composer a chance to have a deeper, I don't know if deeper is the right, you're just there from the ground up instead of taking something and shifting it to what your muse says. Your muse is kind of there riding on the shoulder from the get-go.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's the right way to say it.
No, absolutely. Absolutely right. I mean, I think, you know, the pieces that, you know, one of my works that I wrote, No Fairy Tale Here, sort of happened that way. Where there was she was a poet that was commissioned alongside with me to create this piece, marrying her poetry with my, and I didn't know her. We just kind of met kind of over online and over the phone, and she decided she was going to write on this subject. And so she wrote something original, brand new, just for me to set. And that piece, it was hard to write. It was interesting, but it resulted in something so dynamic and interesting that I would never have thought of on my own. And it remains one of my more most performed pieces, and people are like, it's got a lot of energy behind it. And I think it's because when you're there from the ground up at the beginning, I'd like to have more experiences like that. So now I'm looking for more times I can do that.
I'll bet. What made it harder? You were saying.
I think that what was hard about it was the poem was, well, first of all, it's a very emotionally charged kind of anger. There's a lot of like anger and frustration in it.
Mm-hmm, got it.
And I think it was like just feeling this responsibility to know, and knowing that this poetry was written for this purpose. It just felt like there was so much more purpose. And I put so much of my heart into, I mean, I put my heart in everything, but I really, really felt I guess it was the more personal connection that I felt to it, knowing that it was written for me to compose music with.
Right.
I feel like I haven't had that before. Everything else is like the poetry's already existed, or the text source has already written. This is not always poetry. But when it's written just for you to set, like, it's just really personal, and I just feel like I dug deeper than I usually dig, because I felt a responsibility to bring it out in the most authentic way I could, whatever.
Yeah, that's what I was getting from what you were saying, the sense of obligation, of responsibility, of, you've got to rise to this to your utmost.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. So yeah, of course one would want to do more of that, because after going as far as you can with something, other things may feel pale in comparison. Yeah.
Exactly.
Thank you for listening to For Good Measure, and a special thank you to our guest, Zanaida Robles, for joining us today. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to our podcast by clicking on the subscribe button, and support us by sharing it with your friends, posting about it on social media, and leaving us a rating and a review. To learn more about E4TT, our concert season online and in the Bay Area, or to make a tax-deductible donation, please visit us at e4tt.org. This podcast is made possible in part by a grant from the California Arts Council and generous donors like you. For Good Measure is produced by Nanette McGuinness and Ensemble for These Times, and designed by Brennan Stokes, with special thanks to co-producer and audio engineer Stephanie M. Neumann. Remember to keep supporting equity in the arts, and tune in next week for Good Measure.